Welcome back to the Opinionated Benchwarmers Podcast, emergency episode. We got some big news that just dropped, so we wanted to cover it. Obviously, JJ Redick is hired by our Los Angeles Lakers after more speculation of the last, 3 to 4 months, and it's finally done. So we just wanted to react to it. Fellas, react to it. Let's go. Let's get into it. No intro.
Yeah, one man, I'll just say, it's kind of like you said, it's been expected. I'm glad that we're here. We have a coach. I was hoping to get a coach before, obviously, the draft that's on June 26th. We're 6 days away from the draft. So it's good to get a coach. We have our coach in place. I'm really interested. I know we're gonna touch on it, but I'm really interested to see who he put around him.
Yeah, no doubt. Just kind of glad for, pretty much the saga of getting the league guy, the head coach, getting that out of the way. Of course, it's kind of been a long time coming, obviously, since we got rid of Darvin Ham. And so I'm intrigued by the move that was made. Honestly, been a guy that's watched JJ Redick for a long time as being a Duke fan. So watching him, play at Duke, seeing his NBA career, things of that sort. So right now, I'm just kind of overall intrigued by it. I don't want to kind of say too much right now before we jump into some specific things, but just kind of glad that this part is done pretty much and really looking forward to how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we've been in the race for a while. You've been hearing rumblings, and I think the speculation is warranted. We've had plenty of discussions about how LeBron started the pod with JJ Redick, and we felt as though that was laying the table to really, put on display to make everybody else a believer. Um, as we always say, what LeBron wants, LeBron gets. So this is the first piece. So obviously, if he approves of JJ Redick, that's what we're gonna do and we're gonna go with. I did think it was interesting. A report said that Anthony Davis was kind of like the cornerstone of the conversation. Anthony Davis was heavily involved with the hiring of JJ and was a big supporter of JJ. From my perspective, I think if this is gonna work, the superstars have to be bought in. If LeBron and AD aren't bought in, then you're not gonna get too much further than you already are. Initial thoughts just out the gate, just not getting into anything deep, but we just got something. I think we have an upgrade as far as a guy with X's and O's. We know that JJ is no stranger to knowing his basketball, and even as an analyst, he's shown his talent on ESPN about how much he knows about the game and what he knows about the players. My only concern is can he be a man amongst men? Can he lead? Can he command the locker room? And can he get the best out of each and every player on his team? And I think that a head coach having respect is the most important thing that he can have. And I just haven't seen it yet. So I mean, that would probably be my only concern. And he's never done it yet. So him getting the respect of the locker room will be probably one of my first things that I keep my eye on. But I mean, I talked myself into this, like I said on the last pod. I've talked myself into this like a month ago. So I'm good with hiring somebody that knows basketball and can drop the X's and O's for us.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about it, I know a lot of people are afraid because JJ Redick hasn't had success and he has no experience with even being an assistant coach, right? He went from being a player to being an analyst to now being a coach. And I think, when you think about the Minds Game podcast that he's doing with Braun, that was strategic to show the world that, hey, I do know my X's and O's. I do know this game in and out, and I'm a great communicator. We've seen him on podcasts with Taylor Rook, and he was communicating well and saying the things that he want to do. There's been reports out there already saying that he wants to develop, right, guys like Rui, guys like Austin Reeves, and then even like Max Christie, who's a guy that we thought probably should have had more playing time last year with guys that weren't doing well. And Max Christie always did maximize his time when he came in. So, but when I think about him being a first time coach with no experience, there's other six guys that did that and made that jump. Steve Nash was one. Steve Kerr was one. Jason Kidd, who was just in the finals, is another. Derek Fisher and Mark Jackson. So that's a mixed group there, but you do have some coaches in that group that has been successful as guys that never coached before and jump straight into coaching.
Yeah, no, so I do. That's kind of a thought process that I had as well. That's one thing that can kind of maybe scare you a little bit. You think of the guys such as kind of the Steve Nash effect and what that turned out to be, but then you have other examples, of guys, as you mentioned, the Steve Kerrs that was, successful. Mark Jackson was successful. Now, what's very interesting with JJ is, as you mentioned and alluded to as well, too, some of those other guys, they had been either assistant coaches or you had seen them in a front office position. So JJ, is a guy that's going directly, basically, as you mentioned, from playing to being an analyst to being a head coach. Now, one thing that I feel about kind of the type of person that JJ is, I think that honestly, he has that type of personality that he will, to me, command a locker room. He's a guy that's never been somebody that, to me, kind of backed down from whether it was a star player that he played with, or even as we've seen, kind of on the podcast, if you don't agree with what Bron's saying or feeling what Bron's saying, he's not a yes man to Bron on that podcast. I understand being a head coach is different than a podcast, but still, we've seen him at times be on First Take and go at Stephen A. And knowing that Stephen A. runs the ship there and can have him on the show or not, and he's never been afraid to go at Stephen A. So to me, he has that type of personality, but he's also a guy that you've seen throughout his career that star players have honestly kind of liked and have, kind of been drawn to, whether that's his times of playing with Chris Paul, whether that's him still having a relationship with Joel Embiid, having that time of being with Joel Embiid. We've seen how Bron has been drawn to him. And overall, too, I just think that not only in him being a bright basketball mind, I think that he's a bright mind just in general. And another stamp of approval that he received ultimately is from Coach K. I know obviously Coach K was his coach at Duke, and you could say the bias and everything there, but Coach K knows who has a bright basketball mind. He knows who knows their X's and O's. And so when you can kind of get that endorsement from one of the all-time greats, especially a guy that we know as a Hall of Famer, one of the ones that we look at as one of the best basketball minds that we've ever seen, him having that stamp of approval is big. So I think that just looking at that collective picture is interesting. And then also, too, just knowing and understanding that he's really looking to, put in a program. Really, they're hoping that he can become the next Pat Riley, really, of the Lakers. When Pat Riley kind of jumped onto the scene in the, Magic era and the Kareem era, he wasn't a guy that had a ton of, head coaching experience or anything of that sort. He was kind of more so that younger, bright mind, kind of different type of guy. And it worked out in that sense. So I think that that's what the Lakers are hoping for, that JJ can become that next kind of Pat Riley.
Yeah, you gotta love JJ and his brain and his basketball mind and what he could bring. And it was certain instances in the season we've talked about on the pod. If you go back to our catalog, man, how frustrated we'll be on timeouts and then you'll see our team in a situation, and then we're like, man, he sat on the sideline for 10 minutes and he came up with that mess. How many times have we said, how many times have we been frustrated? Just the meme where he's showing the whiteboard and had no X's and O's of plays. It's just 3 bullet points. Clearly the guy was above his it was above his head, but I think with JJ you'll get the complete opposite. For the past couple seasons and coaching cycles, we've always taken chances on people, whether it was Luke Walton and it didn't work. We got a vet like Vogel. He delivered us a chip, and then we went back to a Darvin Ham. So it is a little bit of going through the cycle of extremes. Is like dating, right? You date one girl, that relationship goes wrong. More than likely, you're gonna go to a girl that's a little bit different than the last one that broke your heart. And it just seems like that's where we're at right now. But I will say this: I'm interested to understand the contract details, because if you look at it, since we had Phil Jackson, no coach we've had since we hired them has coached past 3 seasons. So I'm interested to see if JJ was smart enough, in which I don't know him at all, but just getting a feel from him on his podcast and everywhere, he's always ahead of thinking ahead. So I wonder if he has any guarantees of, hey, you got to give me at least this amount of time for me to get for me to turn this around, or any guarantees like that. That would be interesting to me.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And when I think about it and what's been said in the Lakers, right, I think they have to be smart with how they move with these coaches. I think right now teams and people around the league are looking at that coaching situation as a bad one, right? Because they know Frank Vogel, as you mentioned, came, delivered the ship, and eventually got fired. It's like, what do you want out of this position here? So I think they are looking for a coach, and what has been said out there is a coach that can lead them into the future post LeBron, right? Assuming he opt in or signs back with us. And so I think the details of that contract right now is 4 years, and then I saw something said around 8 million. So he does have the 4 years, but again, those contracts doesn't mean nothing, as we seen Monty Williams sign one of the biggest contracts last year and got fired this year. So hopefully the Lakers can be patient and realize that every year you're not going to win a championship. I know the pressures of being a Lakers coach. We all know the pressures of playing for the Lakers. They expect the championship or be there in the championship every year. And so if you fall short of that, that's a failure as a coach. But I think it's time to shift that mindset as a Lakers fan base, as a Lakers organization, because again, it's not good right now how they're building and continue to change these rules, right? You're not going to just trade for a team anymore. You're going to have to absolutely build from the draft. You're going to have to sign your best players back, because every rule that they're doing right now, me and you talked about this, Ramon, offline, was to get the players to come back to their team. The new rule this year is now players can instantly start negotiating with their current teams as soon as the finals is over. No other team but their current team. And so that tells you right there, again, they're trying to exit out and take out the advantages that the bigger markets have and get these teams to keep their players, right? And even with their signing and extensions, the extensions are bigger for the current players with their teams instead of an outside team coming to get them to sign them. Again, all goes back to getting these players to stay with their current team. So again, the Lakers got to change their mindset and build a franchise that can last a long time. Not none of this overnight success thing. It doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that when you look at that, it raises kind of the interesting question, because you have a situation where you, of course, as you said, have to build something that's sustainable. So when they made this coaching hire, they had to look at something, what's going to be potentially long term, what's going to have tremendous upside for the franchise. But we do honestly understand, too, that Lakers organization, you still going to always, season to season, have those big time expectations. You still do have that core of LeBron and AD. Granted, LeBron signs back. We know that that's still something else that we can probably discuss at another time of what may be pending in those regards. But in saying that, I think that obviously you have your guy that's here for the long term, but short term wise, there's going to be a learning curve for him as a head coach within the NBA, which leans to really it's going to be very important how this staff is really built out. So in kind of thinking about that, are there some names that y'all are thinking of right now, or some guys that you would like to see on this Lakers staff to surround JJ Redick as he starts off as a head coach?
Yeah, what about David Fizdale? I think he's been a journeyman in himself. I think that he's a formidable assistant. Maybe can give him some backup in trying to win over a locker room, maybe give some development tips. He's been a journeyman. Hey, maybe, like Los mentioned, Detroit coach, he's fired Monty Williams. So maybe Monty Williams he doesn't want the pressure of he's paid. I doubt he'll probably be taking a vacation this year. But but these are guys that have been proven over the past, decade that they can be on the bench and do well. What about Sam Cassell? He won a championship in Boston. Is he willing to leave Boston and come to LA? And knowing that coach is on a short leash, maybe he try to position himself to be a head coach. So, but I think either way, I think anybody you choose has to have that type of pedigree. It has to be someone that's either a historic assistant coach with a lot of experience or a former head coach that maybe just needs a break and wants to advise. But those would be my top two or three that I'd be keeping my eye on.
Yeah, I mean, I know right now it's like Scotty Brooks has been mentioned as a coach too, as an experienced coach that has some experience. He's right now, I think, an assistant with Portland Trailblazers, so he might want to make that jump. And then our guys that we always talk about, Phil Handy, he's the developmental coach, right? He has the experience with the team. He knows how to handle those personalities, and he seems to just kind of watching him on the sideline over the years, from one coaching staff to the next coaching staff. He's been a guy that's been straightforward and tell the guys how it is. He had a lot to do with the development of Austin Reeves. Obviously, Kyrie Irving and him is close in their development. So he'll be a guy that I would love to have back and like to see in that Lakers locker room. And then I know right now it's rumored with Rajon Rondo. We know his mind in basketball, and we've seen things him talking about the game of basketball and what he would do to beat the Nuggets and things like that. How would you go about beating and neutralizing Joker? He was on a podcast talking about that, so that just speaks to his mind of the game. So it'll be interesting to see if he is able to nab him and put him on the bench.
Yeah, no, I think that, I really lockstep with kind of everybody that y'all said thus far. The names that definitely popped out to me was Scott Brooks, as a name that y'all already mentioned, and then Rondo too. So I think that that's something that's going to be very key, honestly, as it's inevitably is going to be a learning curve, no matter how, bright of a mind you are. Once you step into it, we've all stepped into different jobs and different roles. It's a little bit different than when you're going through that interview process, then when actually those lights are on and you face with situations and circumstances that you haven't been put into yet. So I think that that's going to be very key, and kind of how they prepare for it. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see too, like, now you're about to really jump into the swing of things. You heading right into the NBA draft. That's going to be key. You sitting with that first round pick at, pick 17. And I think they talked about potentially trading up. They have other picks. Free agency is hidden. So I think that is a very interesting time, as it pertains to, JJ Redick stepping in. So
Yeah, yeah, that's what I couldn't say it any better than that. But I will say this as we wrap this up. Obviously, we wanted to jump on and give our thoughts on JJ Redick. But last thing, uh, we was talking about Detroit's coaching situation. We was talking about some Sam Hurley stuff, and then what the next day, the gentleman's fired. I can't think of his name right now. I
Monty
don't know what
Williams.
Money was fired. I just said his name. I forgot it.
Yeah.
Monty Williams fired. What is Detroit doing? Like, what are they doing? Like, it's like they don't, they've been so lost since their championship in the early 2000s and that great dynasty team with Chauncey and those. But to fire a guy after his first season, after making him the highest paid coach, I mean, there are some things you got to do, but for pride's sake and common sense sake, and if I was a Detroit Pistons fan, I would be so disappointed because why would you dump all this money into this man's hand and then you don't really have a vision for him? Like if you hired Monty Williams, I would have been like, okay, cool. He's had success in Phoenix. He's had his success with the Pelicans. And y'all dumping this money because y'all want him to develop these young teams. Y'all want him to be your coach for the next decade to grow within the contract. And you fire him after the first year and you still owe him all that money. I think $30 million, even so now for the next 2 to 3 years, and you have to hire a new coach. That has to be the most dysfunctional franchise in the league, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's a reason why bad these franchises continue to be bad and time after time, right? It just feels like their contract with him was just felt like buyer remorse. Like after they did, it was like, man, should we committed this much money to this guy, right? Who really he's a decent coach, but I wouldn't say he's a top five coach in the league. So again, it just feels like buyer remorse, but I don't know. It continued to be bad. I mean, it's a situation that I don't know if I'll be raising my hand to go and coach. I mean, why? You just pay this guy big money, and then I come in. What is my role now? And what's your vision of your team now? Like, we knew this team was going to be young. We knew this team wasn't going to be good. So you fired this guy, and I don't know. I just can't keep up.
Yeah, and then for me as well, you did it in the midst of a dry coaching market. I mean, what names are out there right now that you can readily point to and say, okay, that's going to be our guy. He's our guy to build out, for the future and long term and things of that sort. I felt that for me, Monty Williams is that type of guy that could be that great kind of in between type of coach, that great tweener type coach that helps to build out that character, build some of those young players and that young talent, and then unfortunately potentially be taken over by somebody else that propels them into that next space and states. But honestly, I just don't understand the Detroit Pistons. I don't really, I guess, care at this point to understand the Detroit Pistons. We're just gonna continue to let them do whatever they do over there so they can be continue to be a bottom dweller within the NBA. But didn't really make much sense to me. I don't know what you really expected him to do in year one with that team and with that program. I have no idea where they're going.
Yep. Well, oh, you get it here, guys. You get a Detroit Pistons segment. Where else would you get it, man? We appreciate you for listening. We had to jump on and give our reaction to that. As always, I say follow us on all our social media platforms, O_Benchwarmers, Twitter, Instagram. Make sure that you are subscribed to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. And also subscribe. We appreciate everybody that has done so already. If you have not done so, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube Opinionated Bench Warmers and leave a like on the video, interact, leave your opinion. What are your thoughts on anything we've said? And we'll be soon if we'll respond if we can. So we'll appreciate our love and support, and we're gonna get out of here.
Later.